The first detonation caught the entire ridge off guard, not because of where it landed, but because of how precise it was. No one had called it. There was no uplink logged, no JTAC line, no strobe beacon on the ground. Just one clean crater on the eastern shelf, followed by two more, each within 3 meters of the impact vector. All 3 strikes came from an A-10 circling at medium altitude, engines barely audible under the low cloud ceiling. In the forward operations tent, the tension wasn't from the explosions. It was from what didn't make sense. A young signals analyst sat hunched in front of a flickering terminal, his eyes locked on a heat map replay. He rewound the thermal footage again and again, toggling between time codes, chasing a modulation spike that didn't exist in the main comm logs, somewhere in the static. Just before the first round hit, there was a voice. He isolated the frequency. Not a command net, not drone control, something buried deep in an auxiliary backup channel, barely strong enough to register. It wasn't a full call-out either. Just a phrase. Not even that. A tone. A single line spoken flat and calm, the way someone sounds when they already know the answer. Outside, light rain tapped the vinyl flap of the command tent. The ground was soft, streaked with vehicle tracks and boot prints, everything muted under the low fog that had rolled in after sunrise. Near the tarmac, a comms officer stood still, headset loose around his neck, staring at the 3 impact craters on a digital overlay. The pattern was clean. Too clean. Around the table inside, officers traded glances, flipping through flight logs that didn't match reality. No JTAC code, no uplink ID. The A-10s had flown the pattern. They had followed vectors, but no one at the TOC had cleared them. No one on record. Anyway, the air inside the tent shifted. Someone opened the outer flap. Boots pressed into the mud just past the threshold. Not hurried, not hesitant. A woman stepped into the light pooling from the center fixture. Her uniform was soaked, darker along the knees and sleeves. Her face was blank, eyes steady, posture neutral. One laminated terrain grid sat folded tight beneath her arm. No one spoke. She moved quietly, sidestepping around cases of equipment and stacked ammo crates. The staff sergeant near the comm crate noticed her boots first. They were caked in rich, dark soil, not the loose powder from the western access road. She had been in it. Not near it, not watching. Inside it. The analyst glanced up from the thermal display. He didn't ask. He didn't need to. He just kept playing the clip again. That voice. That line. The moment the vector locked before the first strike. The same tone. The same timing. Behind her, the ridge stayed silent. No one asked her name. They didn't have to, because from that moment on, every grid they pulled, every timestamp they replayed, came back to one question. Who the hell was on Ridge 5? The Chinook set down just past 0610, its wheels kissing dirt still damp from the night's humidity. Evelyn Shaw didn't rush down the ramp. She moved with purpose but kept her eyes low, scanning the slope before her boots even touched the ground. Her pack was smaller than the rest. 1 waterproof pouch, 1 laminated grid folder, and an old plastic compass looped into the webbing on her chest rig. Nobody greeted her. No clipboard check-in, no welcome brief. A sergeant nodded once and pointed toward a clearing near a satellite relay crate, already humming with idle power. That was her zone. Line of sight fallback radio. Not call sign authorized. Not uplink active. Not part of air tasking order. Just a human patch in case the real comms failed. The rest of the unit barely noticed she was there. One operator, shoulders stiff from plate fatigue, walked past and muttered something under his breath. She couldn't tell if it was a joke or a warning. It didn't matter. Evelyn just adjusted the strap on her chest and took in the tree line to the east. The slope broke in 3 angles across less than 100 yards. The map in the digital tablet showed only 2. The previous night, on the flight in, she had traced that ridge using printouts folded between MRE packets. She had circled erosion patterns that didn't match the weather history. The text said the satellite composite was recent. Evelyn knew it was off by at least 4 months. Roots don't shift like that overnight. She didn't argue. She never did. Instead, she sketched her own overlays with a graphite pencil and a protractor clipped from a training manual 2 years out of date. She didn't need them to believe her. She just needed to know what was real. While the others set up antenna alignment, Evelyn lay prone near the edge of the fallback shelf and compared the contour dips with her boot edge. She tracked fog drift, pressure bends in the grass, and the way the heat clung lower near the second draw. No one else marked those things. Her call sign hadn't been included in the TOC summary. Her signal wasn't monitored, and her frequency was listed as passive, emergency use only. The briefing she received was short. Observe. Record. Do not transmit unless directly engaged. Still, she memorized each grid's altitude band. She double-checked the coordinates between hard copy and handheld. She noticed that one map had a reversed decimal, turning a slope's incline from 13% to 31%. No one had caught it in QA. It would have skewed any drone operator's approach by nearly 30 feet of clearance error. Evelyn folded the map along its old creases and tucked it back into her pouch. She didn't say anything, just watched the wind slip sideways across the canopy and made a silent note about how the thermal distortion would scatter a laser mark. Then she checked her own gear backup battery, earpiece coil, analog compass, and waited. She wasn't bitter. She didn't expect anything else. She just wanted the math to be right. Evelyn sat low beneath the tree line, her elbows pressed into the damp soil, laminated grid spread open across her lap. The map had worn edges from folding, soft creases where she'd bent it hundreds of times to check elevation shifts and ridge angles. She wasn't assigned to make corrections. No one had asked her to verify the slope differentials or recheck the contour overlays, but she did it anyway. She started with a graphite pencil, tracing each known line and measuring slope against the incline she could see from the tree shelf. Her left hand steadied the map while her right marked angle adjustments and ticks, recalibrated where the contour dropped too steep for safe approach. The printed chart was 3 months old and already behind. Evelyn layered new elevation rings using a clear protractor she clipped from a field notebook no one else carried. The thermal drift vectors were trickier. She watched the morning haze roll off the treetops and tracked how it clung in shadow pockets below a moss-covered outcrop. That meant high humidity and a persistent cool zone that would scatter infrared. She didn't have to log that, but she did. On the inside of her glove, with a dull pencil nub. To her right, a comms crate buzzed faintly. Somewhere farther downhill, 2 recon Marines argued over battery packs. None of them looked her way. Evelyn leaned forward, adjusted her compass, and ran a new bearing from her position to a suspected low trail used for resupply. She plotted the route with no expectation it would ever be used. Her laser designator sat clipped to her vest. The fins were scorched from a training malfunction 2 weeks back. Its internal optics were unreliable, occasionally misaligned with recoil shift. She had written it up once, then stopped. It was no longer a tool. It was a reminder, a mark of the role she'd trained for, but never been cleared to perform. Still, she carried it. Each day she recalibrated her overlays by hand. The terrain shifted subtly with rain runoff and root swell. Evelyn adjusted accordingly. She noticed 2 boulders marked on the chart that no longer existed, likely cleared during a fire break 2 seasons ago. The new map had failed to update it. She drew corrections in place, cross-referencing with a declassified elevation profile used during an old engineering sweep. She memorized altitudes and line-of-sight gaps. She measured how wind curled along the eastern bluff and imagined where smoke would linger after detonation. Her mind worked like a rangefinder, mapping invisible vectors others would only consider if things went wrong. Evelyn didn't need recognition. She needed the math to hold. No one checked her work. No one validated her marks. She expected nothing. But when the moment came, she wouldn't need to guess. She already knew the terrain better than the tablet did. She wasn't preparing because she hoped to be used. She was preparing because someone had to be right, when everyone else stopped paying attention. The first burst of automatic fire broke through the tree line at 0742. It wasn't warning fire. It was aimed tight. Short bursts that cut through the mist like knives. Evelyn didn't move. She was crouched low against a root wall, one hand steady on the damp ground. Her eyes fixed down the slope where the fog trembled with each distant muzzle flash. Comms fractured instantly. The lead recon element tried to call grid positions, but their transmissions clipped and overlapped. A call sign came half through, then cut off mid-sentence. Another voice shouted a direction East Ridge, upper shelf, then went silent. Evelyn adjusted her headset gain without looking, turning down the static until she could hear breathing between words. No one mentioned fallback. No one activated the contingency relay. She could hear their gear slapping hard against chest plates, webbing loose, boots scrambling without formation. Someone yelled cover with no direction behind it. Leaves scattered across the ground as branches snapped under movement. Evelyn didn't join them. She pressed closer to the dirt and followed the rhythm of disarray through sound. A grenade popped to the south, far off but loud enough to rattle the canopy. The echo bounced unevenly between ridge points. It wasn't coordinated, just panic fire. Someone had broken protocol, probably tried to clear blind through a defilade. The static on the main channel spiked and died again. Evelyn didn't speak. She kept count of the shots by caliber, distance, and echo delay. She knew the ambush hit the forward sweep, not the central post. She waited to hear if anyone would call the fallback frequency. No one did. 2 recon soldiers ran past her position without a glance. One cursed under his breath, tossing a dropped radio battery aside. His partner didn't say anything, just adjusted his sling and ducked into cover near the lower crest. Evelyn remained where she was. She tapped the edge of her boot to measure slope angle, then noted the shift in fog density rolling west. The forest wasn't loud, it was fractured. She tuned into the secondary channel again, listening for command verification. Nothing came through. The relay node she was assigned to hadn't been touched. They were forgetting it existed. And in that silence, Evelyn understood. She wasn't part of the plan. She never was. But she was the only one still holding position. And now, she was the only one listening. The backup channel hissed once, then held. Evelyn tilted her head and adjusted the gain dial with 2 fingers. Static settled. A faint voice came through, clipped and tight. Strike 2, holding at 2000 AGL, no laser, no spotter, no uplink. You got anything? Evelyn crouched lower and flattened the laminated grid against the dirt. She ran her finger across the bearing line she had drawn earlier and marked it once more. The terrain was fixed. The elevation she had confirmed by hand. Strike 2, Ridge 5. I have you on audio. Terrain is high density. No open burn. Do not abort. Stand by for blind coordinate feed. There was a pause, a longer silence than usual. Ridge 5. Say again. You're running a target solution without a mark. Evelyn steadied her hand over the map. Her pencil tapped the contour ring once. Then again. Grid Alpha 3. Offset 27 degrees west. Elevation 670. Terrain-based only. Still no laser confirmation. Still no visuals. The line crackled. Negative spotter. No IR. You're trusting math. Her voice didn't shift. Yes. The pilot exhaled. It was audible even over the channel. Are you cleared for this? No. Another pause. The engines of the A-10 groaned faintly through the canopy overhead. Evelyn could feel their pressure roll down through the slope. She didn't look up. She stayed on the grid. I've got geometry, she said. Acoustic trail confirms fallback movement. Wind drift matches last contact. You want the strike or not? The silence that followed was heavier than the fog. Strike 2, copy vector. Southbound sweep, no mark. Manual offset. She tapped the dirt next to the grid. Adjust heading to 187. Descend to 800 feet AGL. Final call on my timing. Roger. Holding on your word. Evelyn braced her boots against the ridge edge and leaned into the slope. The engines shifted above. She could feel the pitch change. Strike two, 2 seconds to final. Still no visual. She waited. Splash. There was no explosion at first, just the sudden fold of fog, a vibration in the soil, the sound of leaves lifting before falling again. Then the pilot's voice returned. Ridge 5, I still don't see your mark. Evelyn looked back at her grid. But I see your math. Target confirmed. The channel held steady, quiet with something new behind it. Not protocol, not command. Respect. The fog was thicker now, clinging to the tree line and coiling low across the draw. Evelyn pressed the laminated grid flat against the dirt and anchored the northeast corner with a river rock. Her fingers moved quickly, checking her earlier mark. The offset she had sketched was still accurate, but wind drift had shifted to the east by 5 degrees since her last observation. She adjusted the bearing with a pencil stroke, then keyed her radio. Strike 2, Ridge 5. Confirm holding pattern. The pilot answered within seconds, clipped and wary. Ridge 5, holding north of grid Alpha 3. Negative laser. No strobe. No heat bloom. Confirm you have visual. Evelyn stayed crouched, watching the canopy twitch under engine pressure. Negative. Terrain-based vector only. Confirm readiness to receive heading and descent. There was a longer pause. She imagined him checking his HUD, seeing nothing but elevation lines and fog. Go ahead, he said. She didn't blink. Heading 187. Descend to 800 AGL. Angle of approach 27 degrees west offset. Strike point is elevation 670. Contour tight. Cross slope positive. Recommend ingress blind. Confirm fire discipline on final call. That's a tight corridor. Ridge 5. You sure? Yes. Still, no uplink authorization. Still, no command handoff. The main net was dead. Evelyn had nothing but a plastic compass, hand-corrected map, and instinct. Copy vector, the pilot said, less certain now. No visuals, no spotter, just your word. Her voice didn't shift. That's all you need. The engines grew louder, closer. She tracked the sound as it curved over the slope, noting how the wind pushed the roar slightly west. Evelyn braced one boot into the hillside, her hand hovering above the grid. Strike 2, 5 seconds to splash window. He didn't respond. She counted her breath. 4, 3, 2. Still no laser, he said. She paused. Splash. There was no immediate sound, just the air pulling inward, like the ridge took a breath. Then a low thud, deep and round, pushing dirt into her knees. Leaves rustled up into the canopy and fell again in slow motion. The voice came back on the channel, quieter now. Direct impact, confirming center of target zone, splash within margin. She lowered the mic. No one watching could have explained how she did it. No uplink, no drone eye, no JTAC tag. Just a map, a slope, a voice. And it worked. The echo from the first strike was still folding into the valley when Evelyn moved to her next grid. She didn't wait for applause or confirmation. She knew the impact landed right. The acoustic delay matched her expectation, and the shift in fog above the blast zone confirmed center point turbulence. But the wind had changed again. Slightly warmer. Cross-slope draft from the southeast. It would affect thermal reflection on the next vector. She recalibrated in silence. Offset drift would skew at least 4 degrees on descent if he came in low again. She ran her finger across the laminated terrain overlay, tapped a new mark between contour rings. Ridge 5, ready for next vector. Conditions shifting. The channel paused, static holding the edge of his voice. Ridge 5, strike 2. You're not command, you're not cleared for this. Evelyn adjusted the angle on her compass without looking up. Neither is anyone else. There was no tension in her tone. No force. Just truth. Stated plainly, the main net was dead. TOSI silent. Grid support fractured. She was the only voice between him and a wasted sortie. Go ahead, he said. Evelyn's hand moved with certainty. Adjust heading to 202. Gain altitude to 1000 AGL. Offset angle now 31 degrees west. Account for thermal lift. Strike zone is elevation 695. Target is tree-covered slope with shallow berm and runoff dip. Copy. Strike 2 responded. You're adjusting for drift-off first splash. Correct. Fog displacement confirms left pull. He hesitated again, but this time it wasn't doubt. It was recalculation. You running a fire control system down there? Just a map and boots in the mud? The line stayed open. Then, in a quieter voice, "You've got a better picture than I do." Evelyn didn't smile. She checked wind again by watching the angle of falling leaves against her compass face. Still holding. "Strike 2, final call on my mark. Confirm ordnance armed." "Affirm on vector." The low whine of the warthog grew sharper as it banked wide and swept in along her line. She counted seconds by pulse, not watch. 5, 4, 3. "No visuals," he said. 2. Still blind. 1. Release. The second impact came harder. The dirt flexed beneath her. Trees at the far ridge bent inward from the shockwave. This one hit deeper, lower, like it knew the ground better. Evelyn stayed still, listening for confirmation. Splash confirmed. Secondary ignition. Impact is clean. She keyed her mic but said nothing. Strike 2 came back on channel, voice leveled, tone changed. "Ridge 5, I'm holding until you call me off. Tell me where to look next." There was no more hesitation. Just trust. The smoke from the last detonation was still thinning when Evelyn turned back to her grid. This one would be close. Too close. She didn't say it out loud, but she knew the risk. The target sat less than 40 meters from friendly ground. Misjudge it by even 5 degrees, and the shrapnel would hit her own line. She pulled her laminated map closer, using a gloved knuckle to sweep moisture from the corner. Every burn scar, every contour shift she'd logged from the first 2 strikes mattered now. She redrew the slope's arc using a dry pencil, corrected for the new wind shear climbing over the western bluff. Strike 2, final target. The channel clicked once, then came his voice, steady but low. "This one's close. Ridge 5, danger close. Confirm you've got clear separation." Evelyn stared down at the overlay she'd updated by hand. She didn't look up at the sky or wait for permission. "Separation confirmed. I've walked this ground. I know its lines." Another pause, then a breath. "Go ahead." She moved slower this time, her pencil tapping the mark with final certainty. "Target zone Bravo 6. Heading 208. Descend to 750 AGL. Offset angle 29 west. Strike point is elevation 663. Ridge shelf below runoff wall. You'll have 2 seconds of canopy clearance." "Roger. Still no laser. Still no thermal." "No need. This isn't guesswork. This is remembered terrain." Static filled the space where his voice had been. She waited, eyes on the small ring she'd sketched hours earlier, now layered with burn drift from the previous impact. "Strike 2, vector confirmed. Ordnance hot." She could hear it coming. The A-10 roared lower now, pulling the fog apart in ribbons. Her fingers gripped the edge of the map. The slope trembled as the bird came into final. She didn't breathe. "Final call. Ridge 5. She pressed the mic. "Now?" The release wasn't loud. Not at first. The round dropped in clean, no flutter, no whistle. The forest held its breath. Then the strike hit. Not a roar. A deep compression. The ridge shook like it was exhaling. The sound swallowed more than echoed. Leaves folded inward and lifted. No trees broke. No echo followed. The forest held. Seconds passed. Strike 2 returned. Impact confirmed. No friendly contact, no drift. That was perfect. Evelyn didn't speak. She just lowered her hand and folded the map once more. The laminated edge creased neatly along the line she'd drawn that morning. Strike 2 didn't close channel right away. "Ridge 5. Yes. That was textbook. No, that was memory." She unplugged her mic. The air was quiet now. Not still. Just finished. And for the first time since the mission fell apart, the forest sounded like it could breathe again. She walked back into the base with her boots soaked and her sleeves streaked in dirt. No one looked up at first. Just another comms relay returning from fallback, soaked from fog and sweat. Her headset dangled unplugged from her vest. Her left knee was caked in dried mud from where she'd braced against the ridge. Inside, the lights buzzed soft and blue. The analyst at the corner terminal was still rewinding thermal footage from the strike zone, frame by frame, trying to find the source. There was no laser, no uplink, no tag, just 3 perfect impacts. Evelyn stepped up to the desk and placed the folded terrain grid down, one edge damp and smeared from the slope. She didn't say a word. The analyst looked up halfway, confused. Then his eyes landed on the grid. The marks weren't standard. Hand-drawn elevations, contour overlays, pencil-scratched bearings along faded laminate. He flipped it open, paused, flipped again. "You?" His voice trailed off. One of the pilots leaned closer. His flight suit was still zipped to the chest. He stared at the map without speaking. Evelyn said nothing. Her hands were relaxed, resting at her sides, fingers still stained with graphite. Behind them, a nearby monitor clicked. Strike 2's voice came through the open channel, calm and steady. "Ridge 5, if you're on base, you got my respect. You saved lives out there." Someone else turned. A murmur followed. Not full words, just movement. Another pilot stood at the end of the hall, arms crossed. He gave a nod that wasn't for show, not ceremony, just recognition. Evelyn stepped back once. Then again. She didn't linger. She didn't correct the analyst now holding her map with both hands like it was evidence. The hallway cleared a little. Not fully. Just enough to let her pass without bumping shoulders. She walked slow. No cheers, no handshakes, no salutes. Just the quiet space people make when someone's earned it. At the far end of the corridor, a voice whispered without knowing it was out loud. That was her Ridge 5. Evelyn didn't turn. She kept walking until the noise thinned behind her. And in that silence, without fanfare, without a title, everyone knew exactly who had pulled them out. Not a name, not a rank, just the one who remembered the terrain when no one else did. In the aftermath, as the last gray motes of ash performed a slow, silent ballet in the air before settling upon the damp leaves of the tree line, a new kind of quiet descended. It was not merely the absence of explosions, but the death of a different kind of noise. The incessant, arrogant hum of technology that had promised perfect certainty. The once deafening roar of static on the radio channels bled out into a resigned hiss, then a whisper, and finally, a profound silence that left a vacuum in its wake. Within the command tent, there was no grand ceremony being hastily assembled, no medals being polished, no official commendation being dictated and logged into the permanent record for that harrowing and pivotal hour. The only testament to the victory, the sole, silent witness to the events that had transpired, was a single, folded grid map lying starkly at the edge of an analyst's desk. It rested there, an analog artifact in a graveyard of dead screens, its surface an intimate tapestry marked by the sharp, decisive lines of a graphite pencil and the faint, human stains of sweat and determination. The ink of the printed grid had run just enough from the clinging fog to blur the indifferent numbers. But the hand-drawn lines, the lines that mattered, still held with an unwavering and defiant clarity. Evelyn, the architect of this impossible success, was not a name found on any roster for tactical fire control. She was a ghost in the operational machine. She possessed no high-level clearance that would grant her access to the primary channels, no memorable call sign that would command immediate respect, no authority vested in her by rank or title. Officially, she had been assigned to a forgotten fallback position, a human contingency so unlikely to be used that her presence was more of a bureaucratic footnote than a strategic asset. But when the sophisticated digital architecture of the mission catastrophically cracked under pressure and the confident voices of command were swallowed by an electronic abyss, her response was not defined by the panic that gripped those around her. She did not waste a precious second seeking permission from a command structure that no longer existed. Instead, with a calm deliberateness that felt almost sacred in the surrounding chaos, She unfolded her worn paper map, turned toward a more ancient and reliable truth, and simply began to listen. And from that state of focused listening, she achieved what the entire technological apparatus could not: utterly isolated, with no satellite uplink to give her a God's eye view, no infrared imaging to pierce the concealing fog, and with not a single superior officer to validate or back her calls. She began to give orders that wove a thread of logic through the madness orders that saved lives. The pilots, flying blind in their multi-million-dollar machines, their advanced displays, now a kaleidoscope of useless, glitching symbols, followed her vectors without sight. They did so not because her voice carried the sharp demand of authority, but because it possessed something far more powerful, an unshakable intimacy with the ground below. In her calm, measured cadence, the terrain ceased to be an abstract set of coordinates and became a living, breathing entity with slopes, shadows, and paths that made intuitive, undeniable sense. The entire episode was never an exercise in the application of power. It was a masterclass in the virtue of precision. Power is a blunt instrument, loud and reliant on overwhelming force, a hammer that shatters. Precision, her brand of strength, is a scalpel, quiet and sure, guided by deep knowledge and an unwavering hand. She knew the subtle, treacherous slope of the ridge with a familiarity that no orbiting satellite, with its cold, detached measurements, could ever hope to replicate. She placed her faith not in the flickering, fallible light of a digital screen that showed only a snapshot of a single moment, but in the fluid, dynamic landscape that lived within her memory, a landscape she understood not as data, but as a story of rock, water, and time. And so, in the heavy, reverent quiet that followed the thunder of the last strike, no one thought to ask about her rank or to verify her credentials. Such formalities had become utterly irrelevant. They knew her instead by her position on the earth and by her purpose in the chaos. They knew her by what she alone had done when no one else knew how to move. She was no longer Evelyn Shaw, geospatial analyst. She was Ridge 5, an identity forged in crisis and defined not by a name tag, but by an action. This serves as the most potent of reminders that not every leader steps into the light wearing the decorated uniform of command, just as not every hero's story is proclaimed loudly for the world to applaud. More often than we realize, the individuals who are instrumental in saving us are the ones who never feel the impulse to ask for the microphone, the ones who find their purpose not in the spotlight, but in the foundational work performed in the shadows. Sometimes, their greatest contribution is simply to see the flaw in the plan, to hold the line when others retreat, to do the necessary work without expectation of reward. And sometimes, their most profound act is to simply fold a map when the job is done, leaving their masterpiece unsigned, and walk quietly away. So, take a moment, just for a second, to think about the people who populate your own life in this way. They are the quiet architects of stability, the unassuming guides who offer direction from behind the scenes, who reserve their voices for the moments when they count the most, and who feel no innate need for a spotlight to fundamentally and irrevocably change the course of something far bigger than themselves. The official mission logs of history, written by and for the powerful, might inevitably forget their names, consigning their contributions to the unread footnotes of the past. But the ground itself, the very soil they stood upon, remembers where they held their position. The memory is carried in the grateful silence of the survivors, in the legend that will be passed in hushed tones between pilots for years to come, and in the silent, living truth of a job well done. And if you allow yourself to be quiet for long enough, to listen past the clamor of the world for the steady, underlying rhythm of what is real, you will find that you remember them too.